Hi, I'm Chris Stening, Senior Advisor with 8 Advisory, and I'm delighted to be here today with Graeme Oxby, CEO at Community Fibre, and Mark Menzies, one of our directors here at 8 Advisory. So, hi Graeme, very nice to have you on today.
Hi, Chris, and hi, Mark. Very good to be here. Happy to just talk with you.
Good. So, just tell us a little bit about Community Fibre and where you guys are at.
Happy to do that. So, Community Fibre is London's largest alternative full fibre broadband network. We have over 1.3 million homes ready for service that you can connect within the next 48 hours if you wanted to. We've made good strides in our take-up, our penetration rate now over 25% on an average basis, and we have older cohorts are beyond 40 and often into 45% already. So, we're seeing what we believe is very good demand for alternative providers of broadband, and with the development of the business that seems to continue to grow rapidly as the months go by. That's been very pleasing, and I think also just to say that we are one of the few that are profitable now in terms of EBITDA profitability, having been profitable from April last year and continue to grow and grow in that dimension. So overall, businesses are performing well and performing strongly, and I think proving demand for alternative providers, broadband services in London.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. As we sort of dive into some of the questions, thanks for reading the report, and hopefully you found it useful. And the first thing we really wanted to explore is, should we as an industry be concerned that the Altnet take-up, yours may be different, in the last 6 months has gone up by 1%, whereas Openreach has gone up by 3%.
It's quite a complex question. I think we need to break it down a little bit to its component parts. Within the Altnet sector, you've got obviously a large number of Altnets, some that are still growing their network very quickly. And that, of course, means that the pure maths of your customer growth versus your network growth aren't always terribly flattering. And I think that's a factor in the 1%. I think you do have a relatively small number of people who are really driving a much bigger take-up growth than the 1%, proving, I think, that there is demand for an alternative provider in all sorts of different parts of the country. And then, of course, you've got a relatively large number of smaller Altnets who have not really been obsessed about customer take-up in a meaningful way. And I think they are the businesses where take-up is low. And of course, that brings the average down quite a lot overall. And I think in the comparison to Openreach, you're talking about a rather different model, really, because Openreach are very much about migration of existing copper customers to fibre with their sort of big brand partners. Obviously, it's much easier to migrate a customer you already have than it is to find a new one. And of course, the Altnets are finding new customers, whether they be wholesale Altnets or retail Altnets. They're all finding new customers. I think the encouraging thing is that the big providers are losing lines or are not growing their lines very quickly at all. And that is, I think, testament to the fact that the Altnets are starting to eat into the market. And I think your own report shows the growth of the Altnets in terms of total market share. And I think that we should focus on that. But certainly at the core of the question, it's a mixed bag. And there are some very strong performers. There are some who are still growing very quickly, but growing their network maybe faster than their customer base, and probably a few too many who are not really growing fast enough for the network they have in terms of that obsession around customer acquisition.
Thank you.
No, very good, Graeme. One question we had is, in terms of overbuild, how concerned are you about that issue? And I mean overbuild by other Altnets, Virgin Media, Nexfibre, and was quite keen to get your views on overbuild, in particular how that impacts where you plan to build in the future.
Yeah, overbuild is a really interesting topic. Our experience, and it's been consistent in the last sort of 4 years or so, is a little bit of overbuild is a good thing. We have found that our take-up rates are consistently higher in areas where there's some overbuild than where there's not overbuild. But when you think about it, that's pretty logical, because it means that it's really a product of there being more awareness in the area of the fact that there is a different sort of network available. And as long as you're very present at the time that consumers are thinking about maybe changing to fibre, then you've got a good chance of picking up some customers. So I think that is our sort of experience of overbuild. Now, of course, you don't want too much overbuild, but certainly in the short term, we think a bit of overbuild is pretty healthy. And that's both if you turn up a little bit late or if you're ahead of the pack. But what you definitely don't want to do is turn up very late to the pack, in particular where you've got multiple successful Altnets. That I think is that you should definitely not be pursuing a build strategy. But we all have to acknowledge that, of course, Openreach is going to be everywhere in due course. Virgin or Nexfibre are going to build out their network or refresh their network. Now, I think that we should all be pretty confident that we can compete effectively against those networks. We and another number of Altnets are proving that there is demand, proving that customers will switch. And so I don't think we should fear the fact that Openreach have got their network nearby, or indeed that Virgin or nexfibre have got their network nearby. There are large components of our proposition which I think are very appealing to consumers, and they're happy to switch. I don't think we should shy away from that sort of overbuild. But overall, we found it to be quite a positive experience. Maybe not what we or other commentators would typically expect someone like me to say, but so far it's been okay. You just need to be careful. Now, in terms of future builds, you take into account how long an alternative network has been present, how successful they are. There are quite a lot of networks that have been built and turned up, and there's no overbuild, and they don't have many customers. It's not as if just being present as a non-incumbent is a route to success. You really have to work it from a sales and marketing point of view. You have to make sure you win the customers. So you have to look at the areas you're thinking about building in, take quite a considered view around who's there, how long they've been there, how successful they've been, and do you think you've still got enough firepower within your proposition, to steal some share from the incumbents, which I suspect most Altnets do have that capability.
Thanks. One of the questions we wanted to ask was just around sort of pricing and ARPU, because what we're seeing, especially more in metropolitan areas, is pricing is super competitive, and Ofcom have said it's come down 4%. You guys are very competitive in your markets. Just wanted to get a view on, is that current level of pricing and ARPU really sustainable for long-term business growth?
We believe it is, to be honest with you. Full fibre is a transformational technology, runs at a much lower cost base, and it's got enormous capabilities in terms of the speeds that it will deliver over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So we're very much just at the beginning of the speed journey. And the other factor, of course, is that broadband is wildly overpriced from the incumbents. People are paying too much for not a terribly quick service and generally not good customer service. And so there is room to take share. But I think as part of any challenger taking on an incumbent, pricing is always a key component. It always has been, and it always will be. And your pricing needs to be eye-catching. And I think also we've got to make this technology available to everybody. It shouldn't just be left to a relatively small number of people who can afford to pay very high prices for very high speeds. The fact that this is transformational means that we can actually transform the market by making these sorts of speeds available to everybody for not a terribly large amount of money. And I think that's really the important part of what the Altnets are doing. And after all, is why many billions of pounds were put into the market to win share from the incumbents who had consistently not done that. They'd left high speeds and high prices in the market, and meaning that most people couldn't access it. Our job is to be transformational as Altnets. That's why we exist. That's why Ofcom like us, because we're doing something different and something new and providing essential connectivity for the vast majority of the population. So pricing is super important, and it's important, I think, to have a full network. There's quite a number of highly priced empty networks. If you're going to build a network, you want people to use it, and you want people to fill it. And pricing is one of the components of that. And I think it's really important and shouldn't be shied away from. Now, of course, the question comes in, is it sustainable? Are you just pricing cheap to gain share? And you've clearly got to make sure that it is sustainable, that it is profitable. Now, we start off lucky in the sense that the networks run at lower costs. These are networks that have a lower cost base to support and to grow, and indeed to sort of adapt in the future. So that's a good start, but you can't just rely on that alone. You do actually have to be very, very focused on running a really lean business if you're going to charge low prices. And that means that you need to not try and become a big telco, avoid the organizational structures of big telcos like the plague, because they are great ways of spending a lot of money and slowing things down. And you absolutely have to focus on getting the customer experience right first time, every time, because that strips out enormous amounts of bad cost from the business. And if you get it right first time, you don't bear much cost from a customer. They stay happy, you're not spending a lot of money answering the phone calls, etc., etc. And so you can grow with relatively low ARPUs compared to the existing market, but with increasing profitability. Our model has been very much to drive growth, to fill the network, but also to run a very lean business. And that's why our EBITDA has been improving every month. And whilst our customer base has been growing dramatically, our actual cost base has been falling steadily every single month. So you can do it, but you've got to refocus on it and become really operationally lean, I think. So we would say it's sustainable. We are at the beginning of a multi-gig world, and there will be room for further pricing as the speeds increase. On the networks that certainly some of us have been building, they will already cope with 10 gig. And we're charging people for 1. Unsurprisingly, there'll be a bit more money to come from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 gig product speeds. And that, I think, is something that we've started, but it's going to run a long time. and we can generate incremental ARPUs as demand for higher speeds increases.
Cool. Well, you guys are currently profitable. You've got very competitive pricing. You've clearly got the calculations right.
Very good. Just the last question I wanted to cover. So I think you touched on earlier, in the maturity of a fiber business, there's the network build, and then there's that second critical phase, which is monetizing that network investment and driving penetration. Your overall penetration is quite strong, 25%.
Yeah.
And when we look at your more mature cohorts, we see you're getting closer to 45%, which is very high. What do you think is driving such cohort performance, and whether you see that is where your overall penetration is heading?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's older cohorts are in the 40s and 45%, so very, very strong. And interestingly, they keep on growing. Even though they're at 45%, they still keep on ticking up over time. And I think that's really a reflection of the fact that the market has new people coming in every week. New consumers are considering their broadband choice because their contract's coming to an end every week of the year. And I think as long as you are present and as long as your proposition is strong, and especially in areas where you've got very high take-up, the word of mouth is really strong, so people are saying really good things about you, then you get on the customer's consideration list and ultimately they come and choose you. So quite encouraged, not just about 45%, but the fact we even think it could go even further than that. And then you say, well, look, they're the old cohorts, there's no competition, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at the new cohorts, when there is more competition, then actually our rate of take-up is faster than it was for the 45% cohorts. So, and that's been increasing every year. I think probably as our sort of presence has become more widely known, maybe as our sort of reputation's got a bit better, our run rate on the way to that 45% has got faster as the years have gone by. So, and we don't see anything in terms of the trajectories that give us any real cause for concern around that slowing down. So as I mentioned, even when there's some competition, we still do rather well. We can anticipate certainly very high take-up levels, 30s, 40s, as a good sort of average across the board. Now, this all, of course, is without the benefit of wholesale. And we do have some strong wholesale partnerships, which we're in the process of activating. We believe will further add to the rate of take-up on our network. There'll obviously be a little bit of cannibalization, but net it'll be positive. So I think we do feel pretty encouraged by the rate of growth and the ability of those early cohorts to carry on growing and the ability of our more recent cohorts to catch up with them. It feels pretty strong. And I think you see that in a few other providers as well. It's largely reflective of the fact that in the market, people are coming in regularly every week. And as long as you're present and as long as you've got something strong to say to them, then you've got a chance of winning their business.
Good. Well, Graeme, absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you ever so much for your time. And we will look forward to catching up soon. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been very good to talk with you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mark.